So, some of it comes back to what I was saying before. I've done a lot of service. And it's a question of how much time you decide to let it take.
Right.
It's not that you can't make everything into more than it needs to be, but it's like everything else. You have to decide what is in fact sufficient to do a professional job at it and do it. So I've served on the scholarship committee, and I've served, as I told you, on PAC, and and I recognize the reality is what somebody already made a comment about. You get more credit for departmental service than you do external service. But the external service may in fact be a greater contribution to your profession and in the long run to UNT. It's just that departments are somewhat self-serving. So, you have to say yes so that people think you're a good citizen. You have to do enough of it. You have to show up and be engaged and do a good job. But you don't have to turn it into an insurmountable hurdle. You make decisions quickly. Prioritize the way you make your decisions. You have a reasonable kind of objective criteria that you use to make them, and you move forward. It's kind of how I even think research is best done that way. It's like you could ponder it forever and it'll sit in your drawer, or you can send it out and get some feedback. I have more rejections than anybody else in the college too, but it doesn't matter. So here's what I think. I think most faculty, I've been thinking about this, I think most faculty are more afraid of failure than they are driven to succeed. The only thing I care about is succeed. I don't care how many times I fail. It doesn't matter. I mean, I have a reason for being like that, but that's just, I was homeless 5 times, if you really, and none of that matters. So you just get where you're going. It's,
Yeah, because you don't have to list projected papers on your
Exactly.
CVs, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank God.
It'd be kind of interesting if I did.
I
So-
think tact is important. I mean, you certainly can't afford to annoy your senior colleagues, but one thing I think that freshly minted associate professors forget about is that now that you have tenure, you have some power. Don't forget that you can say no. You're in this sort of groove of thinking, well, the boss man asked me to do it, I better do it. You can say no.
Wesley used to say yes.
Yeah, I remember, but you can.
We all remember.
But I always try to tie it with no, but I will do this, or I'm already doing this. Could you perhaps get so-and-so involved? So I sometimes will, if it's just a bunch of parliamentary, I'll offer up one of my colleagues.
That's the tactfully thing you were looking for.
So,
Human sacrifice.
Not nice, but tactful.
I think you just did that to Angela. Maybe you know what I'm referring to. But anyway, I don't know that you need to say no as frequently as you need to control the time expenditure. Sometimes, being on the departmental scholarship committee is not an enormous burden, especially if somebody works a spreadsheet like some admin, and you can go through the spreadsheet pretty quickly, and then you can go back to the paragraphs and things that are written to verify. If something's going to take you 4 or 5 hours in a term, 10 hours in a term, it's not the end of the world to do it. If something's going to take 10 hours every week, it becomes quite a consideration as to whether you're going to do it.
But if it's something like journal editor, things like that will require.
Yes,
Then
for
you-
sure. And that's
to
difficult.
get, bring that reputation up to the national and international levels, so that's worth doing. It's painful. It's worth doing.
And I don't want to argue with the person in charge of faculty success.
You're welcome.
But the one thing that I think what I would hope that you would make that one page about, whether you actually ever write it down or not, is what you think is important about what you've done. So that when that person reads it, they will see that same thing, or they will see some version of the 750 words. I think we still use that. Because there's lots of committees that I wouldn't put on that one page. Not that they weren't important and I didn't even like them, that I liked them, but rather that they aren't what I want to show. They aren't what I don't necessarily proud of, but that what I believe my contribution is to my society, or my contribution is to UNT. So I think the one thing about promotion that's different is that there are so many different ways to frame who you are and why you should get promoted. And the fact is it's not just, as Victor said this very well, it's not just the numbers and what you've done. It's who you are to this institution, who you are to the intellectual community as a whole. And if you can do that on one page pretty well, then I think you've drawn a nice picture of yourself and you probably will get promoted. But anyway.
I want to follow up on that. So I think many of you said there's no set standard for being promoted. But is there some kind of general, like numbers? I mean, it's much easier to follow a number than just don't know which way to shoot. I think like the number of publications, the number of grants that you need to get, and the kind of services you need to do since you get tenure.
It's so difficult for a number of reasons. First, I mean, the university is emerging research university, and so the scale is quite different now than it was probably 15, 20 years ago. And so it's a continuous kind of moving scale for one thing. The other thing is every department differs so much. Some departments may say, hey, you worked on this paper and you ended up with a publication in the #1 journal in your field. And it took you 2 years to get that. You've only got X number of papers, but because you got this one, wonderful. Some other folks may say, oh, we just care about numbers, and so we don't care what level journal it's at. Or some may say you've got to have a journal that has an impact level of 3 or 4 or 5, and X number of papers in this. So this is a conversation you need to have with your department chair and with the head of your motion tenure committee to kind of find out in this snapshot right now what is expected.
To shoot at moving target is very difficult.
I know, we've all done it.
If our university is like seriously.
So it's guaranteed to be a moving target, but let's make it more
But for
mechanical.
assistant professors to become tenured, we still kind of generally follow what we start with the university, the kind of expectation.
Because it's contractual. At some level, what you were promised when you were brought in is an obligation because it's considered a property right. And so it's complicated to change it after the fact, but nobody ever said promotion was a contractual property right. So it can get incrementally harder overnight, and it would not be fair, but you wouldn't be able to challenge it. So let me kind of elaborate on something that was said. You could look back at the people who were promoted in recent times, and you could say, let's look at everything they did. And you could break it down into, what kind of funded research they had, and where was the funding source, and where did they publish, and what was the impact of the journals, and the number of journals. And you could say, if I exceed every single thing they did, that's a good starting point. That's what I'm telling you. That's a good starting point, because that may not be enough, but it's probably a good place to start. Because, and here's the one problem with what I just said. I think Rick's absolutely right. Everybody has different strengths. You could be in the extreme and make it really simple. Somebody wins a Nobel Prize, do we count how many pubs they have?
No, we don't.
So, exactly.
If they ever publish again.
They may not, and every school in this in our world will hire them, right? So, in every world that we
Get your own
know.
parking spot.
Yeah. So the point I'm making is there's no exact formula that's going to get you there. You need to, but on the other hand, you have to have some sense of your worth, because I really agree with what Rick said about this. Nobody's going to pat you on the back and say you're ready. I had somebody who's up in my own department, and he kept stopping me in the hall. And I don't know how many times I have to say, you need to know when you're ready. Finally, I'm like, yeah, it looks like you're ready. Maybe that made him happy because he went on. But that's ridiculous.
Well, and actually along those lines, I wanted to stand a little early, and I had asked, I went and had a conversation with somebody and said, is it okay if I go early? And this person, mind you, I brought in $10 million at the time. And I was told that, we really want to see if you kind of hit the next, do you get your renewal to your NSF career award? I'm like, and if I didn't?
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
is that not going to be enough for tenure, for promotion? I mean, really? And I was encouraged to really wait another year.
They're always going to
Yeah.
have some flaw. I think Rick's right on this.
Yeah.
Your external value versus your internal value. Faculty are good critics, they can take an article that's published in the top journal and tell you what the flaws are.
Yeah.
If you want to know why it was published, they may not be as good as telling you that. But they're always going to be able to tell you what your flaw might be. If you walk around the halls asking people, they're going to tell you what you could do better.
Right, and so that's why it's really important to kind of see what has taken other people, what has taken them to the next level. And you say, okay, fine, I've talked to my chair's like, seem to be relatively positive. They're never gonna most won't rubber stamp say, yes, that definitely go, And so you just need to make that decision and say, okay, you know what, good enough, let's do it. So.
I mean, I can give you an example. The dean had already cleared me. The chair had said, sure. Our promotion and tenure committee faculty chair said, well, maybe you should wait a year because so-and-so is going up at the same time you are and you'll look bad. And I went, bad word, I don't care. I think I look good enough compared to this person. And if I look slightly worse in some areas, I'm slightly stronger in others, the committee can sort it out. I'll live with that. So, quite frankly, since, again, I was doing very political, sort of convention vote counting, one member of the promotion and tenure committee does not equal a chair or a dean. So therefore, I said, I'm going. And they managed to change their mind or whatever. Again, the thing is, the person was a friend of mine. But, I don't know if they were trying to do me a favor, or it didn't make me look bad. And I'm thinking, hey, wait a minute, you get promoted or you don't get promoted. It's a yes, no. It's a 0-1. If it's the 1, I'm happy. If I'm 0, I can try again next year. So, as painful as it is to fight for it, I think if you think you're ready and enough people think you're ready, don't give in. Don't give in to the naysayers. Because I swear you'll be able to find them.
Yeah, and like I said, it's probably not going to be a yes, you're definitely ready. It'll be, I think you're ready. Consider that a positive sign.
That's usually a serious endorsement because no one wants to tell you, yes, you're ready, and someone nails you for something that they didn't know. Because, no one wants to be that person. But no, that's very good interpretation. Yes, I think you're ready, is go.
Probably true. So you mentioned also, administrators, they're not always full pros. And so when I went up, my chair was an associate. Most of the faculty in my department were associates, almost all. I didn't bother asking anybody. I figured, what is the point? I did mention it to one person who said, well, and then I knew. And luckily for me, I did a bait and switch. I said, well, if I had another 15 articles, I think it'd be better. He said, yeah, probably. But I had 15 acceptances in hand. I said,
You naughty.
I would not play poker against you.
yeah, I don't play it. But the point is, people aren't sitting around waiting to pat you on the back and tell you you're doing a great job. It's a zero-sum game to some extent. It's unfortunate that it is like that.
But I don't think it's that. I'm not that pessimistic. I think to some people it's a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
You win, they lose. But I would like to hope that that's not where we're
You
going
would
as an
like to hope
institution.
there was better motivation than that. Yeah.
I think that for a lot of people it is. But I think it's really hard. What you're asking is if I pass this invisible line, I'm ready.
If you win a Nobel Prize, they're going to tell you you're ready.
It's there.
Maybe.
I think you'll know. I think you'll know.
Yeah, the numbers you gave in your slide, those are all like post-tenure, the number of years.
Yes.
Okay.
Post tenure. Yeah.
I probably missed the first part of your presentation. So, what's the average, years after tenure promotion?
So, and Angela made the point, it's about 7.9 years, but that's counting for the fact that a bunch of people recently who are long overdue getting promoted were. So we have people who've been promoted after 24 years. That was within a year or two ago. A lot of people 10, 15 years. If you look at the histogram, and I put that up and I'll give you the slides, the biggest peak is between 5 and 7. Actually 4 and 7. That's the biggest peak. It dips, sort of slows down around 8, 9 probably, and then peaks back up again. So I think what happens is that people, get neglected and then they complain and they make a comeback. It'd be nice if we actually had a sort of fat end and then it would slope like this, but we don't. But I would say that, the 5-year rule, plan on going, Angela said this better than I was kind of wussy about it. I should have been more specific. I think you should plan on 5 years and just stick that number up, and 5 years, assuming nothing really goes wrong.
And things do, but, that's why I said don't beat yourself up if it happens. Like we had somebody who had a heart condition, but he made it in 8. That's not bad considering he lost almost a year plus.
You mentioned about sabbatical leave, so I'm interested in learning about that more. So it seems never be a good time to take this.
There's never a good time, which is why.
Considering your projects and your students, but I think it's, as you mentioned, I think it would be very beneficial, right, to take one to develop very deeper collaboration that you couldn't do without it, right? So, did any of you have experience on that or any take on this?
For me,
timing or, yeah.
well, for me, so I never really was able to take a sabbatical because when kids came in the picture, and early on I was just too busy trying to get promoted, get tenure and promotion, and then after that kids came in the picture. So, but one thing I had done actually a little bit before kids was I took like a 1 month, kind of like a mini sabbatical, and I can tell you that was probably the best month of my career. I went to University of Sydney, and it was a wonderful experience because I worked hard, played hard. During the week, I worked with one of the world's experts in my field, and it was just wonderful to be in his lab. And then on the weekends, I enjoyed Sydney.
It's a summer visiting professor or?
I was a visiting professor there, yes, and it was their summer, so I was there like, November, December time frame. So I actually worked it out for my colleagues. So I teach for other people sometimes, so they were teaching for me during that period. So yeah, it was a wonderful experience. And so if you find it difficult to take the 6 months or 1 year, just trying to identify, you have to identify funding source, but to even go for a month is very worthwhile. I did this actually 3 times, 2 times I went to, actually 4 times, 3 times I went to one of the national laboratories, and it was wonderful. I even did it one time for like a 2-week period in France, not quite long enough. And so something about, kind of hitting that month-long period is for me, was very nice because I was gone long enough to really develop some nice new ideas, but I wasn't gone so long that my lab was going to fall apart. So
Shorter period may be more manageable.
Yeah.
Summer can work though. I spent 2 summers at Texas Instruments. One as a SRC fellow. In fact, I was the last fellow. I think I destroyed the program, so I never did it again. But I did, and that was incredibly valuable.